Morning, everybody. Welcome to the National Treasure Session. Looking forward to talking about a lot of different things today. So let's jump right in. And jump right in with the usual preamble. So we've had a lot of different things occurred over the last week or so. And I want to talk a little bit. Well, actually, I think what I want to first do is thank Rob for a very thoughtful email he sent me after last week's session. And essentially, to summarize it, he talked about the fact that we have discussed a lot of science items. We've talked about terroir. We've had lots of discussions about tea. But what we haven't talked about much, and what there doesn't seem to be much science on, is the step between consumption, you and I drinking tea, and the brewing of tea. In other words, what is really going on in the bloodstream? Which sorts of compounds are you ingesting, and what specific actions are they creating? So when you look at the science, and his discussion made me realize I need to go back and look at the literature a little bit more carefully, because there actually is some discussion of that in the scientific literature, but it also made me a little bit more cognizant of something that I need to tell you when you're looking at literature like this. And that is, this exact question should always be examined when you see an article which says, well, if you drink green tea, it's got lots of catechins in it, and your chances of getting cancer may be reduced significantly because of EGCG. So this specific question should come to your mind, just as Rob posed it, which is, okay, I get that. Everything's clear. I know catechins, good polyphenol, that's a good thing. Test tube, oh yeah, they destroy tumors. That's a great thing. So the question that's posed here is, how much should you drink? Oh, wait a minute. This is more complicated than that. How are these scientists brewing this? So as I looked at the literature, I looked at several interesting articles, and I really cut out the much older articles. So there are older studies that go back to 2000, 2005. I tried to look at the newer studies on various compounds within tea and how they interact, how they seem to interact in the human body. And you notice by using the word seem, I acknowledge we don't know exactly what that interaction is, because we still don't understand all the compounds and the interactions between the compounds themselves that are in the tea leaves. We have gross understandings that, you isolate one compound, you put it in a test tube, or you put it in a miceling, and they get this sort of reaction. But we don't have a comprehensive understanding. But to go back to the question that's posed is, how's it being brewed? So I took an article about the effects of red tea in terms of how it interacts in the body, how it interacts most specifically with the gut biome. And I took Yunnan red tea as the red tea that was being studied. And when I looked at how they were brewing it, the following information came to light. So they were brewing this, and the question that the scientists were asking, which was very interesting because it dovetails with this exact question, is, okay, how and what compounds should we aim to get out of the tea that will be most beneficial to humans? So they looked at the phenols, they looked at vitamins, and they looked at minerals. And they looked at very specific minerals and very specific polyphenols. And what they were doing is they basically said, if you're focused on the phenol content, brew it for 10 minutes and brew it at a little bit lesser temperature. So for them, a lesser temperature was defined as about 185 or so. If you're interested in some of the other compounds, then you need to brew at different temperatures and at different amounts of time. So really, they address this issue of, or at least on the surface, address this issue of, is there a difference in how you get a health benefit, a potential health benefit in how you brew? So remembering here at Sophie's, we focus obviously on taste and aroma and so forth. However, if you are looking at these for health benefits, then these questions become very important. And so the 10-minute brewing of red tea seemed to produce the most phenol compounds that are useful for humans. So they were looking in particular at something called flavanol 3-OLS, which apparently for gut biome is very useful. But then they were also looking at sodium, potassium, manganese, and one other mineral, another M mineral, magnesium, yes. So they were looking at these, and it turns out that if you brew it for X number of minutes and consume 1 cup, which they defined as should be properly defined, 8 ounces, and you brewed it for 10 minutes, you can get a huge percentage of your manganese required daily allowance or amount. Yes.
Do you know how much tea was being used for that brew?
I do know how much tea, and I've forgotten what the amount was, but that's the other part of the equation, how much tea is actually being used. And I can't right away bring it to mind, but I can certainly go back and give you the exact amount. The other thing is, what is it being brewed in? Because as it turns out, if you brew something in ceramic or glass, same amount of tea, same amount of water, same amount of time, is there a difference in the final result compared to brewing it in an unglazed Yixing pot? Oh yes, there is an enormous difference. So there's notably more caffeine that comes out in glass and ceramic. There are notably more minerals that come out in Yixing unglazed teapots. So further studies, I mean, scientists are working on this right now. Further studies need to be executed. And that's why Rob's point about looking between the cup and the consumption. I mean, all the other things, and Rob acknowledged this, all the other things are important. Terroir, production, cultural terroir, all of that stuff is important. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for alleged health benefit, then these other items have to be addressed. And scientists are working on it. And Rob is correct, there's less literature on this, but there's not no literature on it. And over the next couple of years, you're going to see a lot more literature on this, because this is really an important point, since so many people realizing the health benefits are looking for tea for specific purposes. Now, again, here at Sophie's, the specific purpose is great taste, great aroma, because our starting point is yet another starting point. It's the starting point about, all right, if I give you something and tell you, a beverage, something, and tell you, okay, you drink this stuff and your hair will turn back to its original color of when you were 8 years old. And it'll be really abundant. So you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'll drink this stuff. And when you drink it, it tastes just awful. Yes, you mentally know, like, I have this stuff. But it becomes a struggle every morning, because I gotta brew this stuff. It stinks up the kitchen. My partners don't like it. My children don't like the smell of this. Wow, I don't like the taste of this. Oh, my hair is abundant. And it is 8-year-old hair. How long will you be able to do that? Versus if we brew up a nice national treasure. Oh, we'll see whether it's nice or not today. But positing that it's a nice national treasure, and you're drinking this because of the taste and aroma is good, and then you learn, oh, it's got all these other things, you're going to drink more. So there's really a relationship between how much you consume and how much you like things. And that's truly what we focus on. Now, let's hold that thought for a moment, because I'm also going to talk about the difference, a little bit of the difference and the relationship between large cup and small cup, because there's been lots of discussions going on here, and we have lots of people, or a number of people, who are starting out on a small cup adventure here. And I want to talk about the relationship a little bit before we move on. There is one other article that, courtesy of Robbie, who forwarded it to me yesterday, I want to talk briefly about. And this one's interesting. This one is about how expensive the 10 rarest teas in China are. And so it goes from number one at about $32,000 per kilogram. So that's about $16,000 an ounce, all the way down to about $250 or so per ounce. Did I say per ounce? That's wrong. $16,000 per pound is what I meant. Still a steep price to pay for tea. The only problem with this article was that the writers haven't truly explored the height of the tea market. And we have. So you go to Taiwan. What's the most expensive tea that we're aware of there? It's $100,000 a pound. And it's Eastern Beauty. Okay? That's a lot more than the $32,000 a pound quoted in the article. I ask you this, is this the most expensive that there is? Well, let's go to China and see if anything else is really expensive. These years, Dragonwell, from a very specific spot on the mountain, is about $75,000. And that's reasonably expensive. And remember, I've told you before that from the 3,500-year-old tea tree in Yunnan, every year they have an auction. And last year, the tea leaves from that auction went for about $300,000 a pound. So it was nice that the article pointed out that there are expensive teas. They didn't even begin to approach where the really expensive teas are. And by the way, the scarlet robe that they listed in their article, you can't even get that, no matter how much money you have in your pocket. You can get it. Actually, let's back up here because I made a true statement, but it was incomplete. If you happen to be a government official and you go on an official trip to China, you may be gifted by the government a small portion of that type of scarlet robe. But that's truly priceless because it's just not available to the public. So we have priceless, then we have high price, and then we have market tea. We have all of these distinctions. Okay, so I just wanted to comment on that. Robbie, thank you for the article. These things are always fascinating to me when they come. Small cup versus large cup. And then we'll get into national treasure because I can already sense a thirsty impatience with this opening monologue. So let me deal with the small cup versus large cup. And the reason this has come up recently is in China, the tea literati, the tea industry leaders forwarded us an article about this new, in quotes, new company that is doing large cup. And, you know, we have people from the tea industry who are trying to convince us to open in China because they said, we're sure your formula here is better than what they have in China. Now, they don't understand how we achieved our formula, but they understand it's good because they've been to the shop before. They know it's real good. For those of you who are starting on the small cup adventure, and for those of you who haven't, you would be interested to know that, again, everything that we get into this large cup is related to how we understand how to do small cup. And I want to remind you that the instructions on the internet, even though that we know the internet always tells the truth and always has great information, in this one case, at least, the information is incomplete. And so therefore, what you're learning here, you're getting a chance to see how this is related to the large cup. There really isn't, it's not two distinct things. There's attention to detail in small cup. There's the same attention to detail in large cup. All of these are related, but the way it's currently presented in so many sites on the internet, it's almost like you're cooking. You get a small cup, you know, you put some water in, there's no attention to the details of how to preserve the flavor, how to make the tea with the highest aroma and the best flavor possible. This is always, from a tea master perspective in China, this is always the starting point. If you don't start there, it's a fail. And so that's one of the wonderful reasons that we enjoy actually doing the small cup with you. Those of you who are learning. Jonathan Cook, who has done it with us for 3 years. We've actually talked about him in China to some of the people in the tea industry there, talking about how what the extraordinary thing that Jonathan has done is to put aside preconceptions, put aside what he's either seen in Chinatown or seen on the internet, and then come and learn how to put this stuff together. Makes difference. The taste is amazingly different. All right, enough of a preamble. As usual, as I end this preamble and I'm about to get started, please be careful of your cameras because we see everything and we like to see everything only related to tea and nothing else. That's the first thing. By the end of this session, you will have a real good idea of what National Treasure is. And on top of that, having done for the last 2 sessions, last week Classic and the week before that Opulent, you will have basis of comparison between these 3 red teas. All right, the tea master has been waving at me. Oh, and actually I'm going to take one more digression before I ask her. This will be a really short digression. So why is it that when Xiaobei and I purchase things, we usually like to purchase multiple things? Well, when you have an understudy at work, accidents occur. This last week, I'm sorry to have to report that there was a major understudy accident and a very nice guy wire was broken. Not quite sure how that happened, but the fact that we have multiples of things means that when you have, and true people who are truly fully into tea understand this. If you're in love with something, you have a multiple. If you are casual, you don't need that multiple. So that was one of the things that happened this week, and it just got us to thinking about why we usually like multiple items. This particular item, categorically, we have a multiple, but not the exact item. And so there is great regret coursing through both of our veins, especially mine, over that small but unfortunate accident. All right, so without further ado, it is my pleasure to bring forth the thirsty tea master, Xiaobei.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Yeah. So I do Hong Cha. So I call Dian Hong. We do Dian Hong Hong Cha. It's Yunnan, from Yunnan tea. So if you like it, so today I use the 4 glass. So why I do but usually you do 3, today you do 4. So it's help me. So I want to dissipate steam so fast. So I use 4 glasses. If you like it, 3 is good, 2 is good. But today, yeah. So okay, this is my tea section. I'm at home right now. Okay, if you like it, you can copy me. Okay, I do right now. John, help me.
Yeah. So she's set up here with 4 glasses because that gives her an opportunity to dissipate steam faster. When the more glasses, the more you can distribute the water, and especially in a session like this, more glasses is helpful. You don't have to do this at home, but if you're in a hurry to get the water temperature to a certain level and the steam dissipate it to a certain level. This is a useful way to do it. So this is National Treasure. As Xiaobei said, it's a Yunnan red. Now you see in the market things advertised as Yunnan blacks. That's the same thing as a Yunnan red. You see in the market things advertised as Dianhong, D-I-A-N, and then H-O-N-G. That is the same as what we're talking about here. It's the same meaning, it's the exact meaning of Yunnan red. So red being what in the West is called a black tea, this has a short history. And by short history, I'm not talking about the red part, which is short. I'm talking about Yunnan reds. So that history really got underway in 1938. And it was done by a gentleman, Feng Xiaoqiu, who came from Anhui province, which is a couple thousand miles north of Yunnan. And it was done because of the Japanese. Japanese had invaded China in 1931. By 1937, the Japanese were evidencing a desire and an intention to move south from northeast China. And as such, the tea industry in that area, in Anhui province, in Yunnan County, as a matter of fact, started to make plans to move because they knew that if the Japanese really came south, as they were indicating that they were going to in 1936 and 37, that Anhui would be part of their target. So Feng, who was an executive and also a tea maker in the Yunnan area, was assigned the task to look for somewhere else as far away from possible to set up shop. So this is, and he did that in Yunnan, he did it in Fengcheng. This particular tea does come from Fengcheng. Fengcheng is in western Yunnan. And you notice how she's setting up, she dissipated the heat, made sure, and she used 200-degree water to make sure that all of the cups were absolutely clean, no soap stains on them, dissipated the heat, heats down to about 175 or a little under. Why do you do that? That's to bring out the aroma and also make the flavor bright. She put in the 175 dissipated water, set the timer for 3 minutes, and the tea is starting to steep right now. In the meantime, you heat up the receptacle glass. Okay, so we're in Fengcheng, western Yunnan, 1938. Feng Xiaoqiu goes to this county or prefecture and realizes, oh my gosh, there's tea trees here. There's tea tree forests here. The soil, the terroir is perfect for tea. And they have a history of growing tea in this area. And it's large leaf tea. So the area he came from was small leaf. So they need to make an adjustment. But remember, what they're doing in Anhui is very highly crafted. Instead of just the usual 4 or 5 steps, you pick a bud and 2 leaves usually, you wither, some outside, some inside, you roll in order to break down the leaf cells so that it can start to oxidize, to expose the inside to oxidation, and then you pile the leaves, and again at different heights, depending on your understanding as a farmer of what's ideal for the hybrid you're using and for different amounts of time. Last week, we talked about 3 hours as being, by agricultural scientists standard, seeming to be an ideal time, but remembering every farmer, when they're doing it locally, is doing it according to their family's tradition. So Mr. Fung opened this factory in 1939 to start producing, actually at the end of 1938. The first batch that they produced, they smuggled out through Hong Kong and sent to Europe. Where in Europe? Specifically Britain. And actually a portion of that went to the king. And he liked it so much that he, in effect, publicized it. And people in the tea drinking arena in England loved this tea that was coming from Yunnan. So immediately it was a hit. And so what was the magic that Feng Xiaoqiu used? And we'll talk about that in a bit. All right, timer has gone off. So you separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor, not in a hurry, deliberate, making sure that all the water is separated, or all the tea water is separated. You put the leaves back in. And this is what, when you do this, this is the color that yours should look like. So from my perspective, this looks like an amber gold. The first thing we're going to do is enter the quality arena. But before we do that, we're going to smell these leaves. Oh, smells like tea. Well, this might be okay. Well, let's take a 175-degree sip. Now, what's the difference between that sip and a 200-degree? 200-degree is the inhalation. The 175, you can actually take a little bit more in and cover your tongue. And what are you looking for when you do this? You're looking for where the dryness, is there dryness? And if so, where in the mouth? You're looking for, is this consistency dense, viscous, thin? What is the consistency? You're looking for aftertaste. Is there an aftertaste? What is it? And it may take you a couple sips before you're able to detect precisely what the aftertaste is. And lastly, you're looking for energetics. So what feel do you get from this tea afterwards? The energetics are as important as everything else. Does everyone experience this tea in the same way? Well, thankfully, no. If we were all exact clones of one another, we would experience it in the same way, but we're not. We're genomically different. Therefore, how we experience the tea is going to be different. How we talk about it will be different. Why is that? Aside from the fact that we're not clones. Well, we all start in a different way in terms of definitions of particular flavors. So remembering here, we try and provide guardrails so you don't go over the cliff. So nobody today, everybody knows that nobody today should say garlic when they're talking about this tea. And if anybody says blue cheese, they're already down at the bottom of the chasm. They've gone way over the cliff. But most other reasonable things can fit within those guardrails. Remembering that fruitium, floral, because again, how we define things can be the same thing in effect. So that's not an issue. let's go ahead and do the quality assessment. Roll the tea around your tongue. Take that sip and you think about what it is you're detecting. Hopefully you have your notes out from the previous two tastings so you can think about, well, how is this different? How do I appreciate this versus what I had last week or the week before last? And remember, here at the tea shop, the tea master and I, no favorites, no publicly acknowledged favorites. Let's put it that way. Okay, I took a second sip. I have a pretty good idea of what I believe the quality assessment should be. So it's your turn to brew, and the tea master will brew with you, and then we'll do this together. Remember to set your time for 3 minutes, and remember you should have 175-degree water ready. And the tea packet is packet number 3, labeled National Treasure. It's got 5 grams, and this steeping will be 3 minutes. You can get a second and a third steeping. Both of those are 2 minutes each. Tea master is making sure that the cups are absolutely clean. She's about to use 175-degree water and dissipate the steam. Why again do we dissipate the steam? Is it just because we like to play with water? Is that why we do that? Well, not exactly. Whoops, not even close to exactly. The exact reason is if you're going to make an error in temperature, err on the lesser side, because if you're down to 170 or 168, you're going to increase the brightness of the flavor. You're going to bring out more of the high notes of the aroma. If you're up at 185 or 190, you'll flatten the tea. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the aroma and the flavor. You notice she's feeding the glass to make sure that the temp seems correct, making sure that she's using the right temperature water. And you'll get used to this because as you feel the glass, all the glasses, the one with the water, the one that you're pouring it in, you'll know right away, oh yeah, this is 175, the right starting place, or oops, I drew the wrong temperature. Put the tea leaves in, you shake, you smell.
Is anything lost between 168 and 175?
So the questioner asked, what is it that might be lost between 168 and 175? Well, aside from the 7 degrees, I assume that the question relates to, are there chemical elements or constituents that might be lost? And no, there really aren't. Some things will extrude faster. So, it was just noted, or flavor. No, you don't lose flavor, you augment flavor when you go down in that range from 175 to 168. Nothing is lost in that.
So the cooler, the better?
Okay. This questioner is walking me down a slope. So let's put some guardrails up. So at 32, it is no good. If you get down to 165, 164, you're fine. If you start going under 160, that sweet spot of brightness starts to go away. So it's not that it's, so again, 175, 160, you're not losing anything in terms of the flavor or the brightness. But, and there's other considerations, and I addressed those considerations at the beginning because it may be, no, it's not maybe, it is certainly that at different temperatures, the extrusion rate of the chemicals in the tea occur at a different rate. So let's get into this a little bit because I actually love this question. If you had brewed this at 195 or 200 or 205, and this is probably why the big chains do this, aside from the fact that they're late. Oh, let's not make that statement. One of the reasons they may do it is because caffeine will extrude faster as it's more heated. So if caffeine is part of what one is trying to get, then you're going to raise that temperature. If flavor and aroma is what you're trying to get, you got to back it off. All right. Now I have to think of where I was going. Oh, I know, we were in feng cheng. We'll get back to feng cheng in a minute. All right, your timer has gone off, and you're going to separate the tea leaves from the tea liquor. Not in a hurry, just a nice, careful rhythm, not creating bubbles.
A participant is seeing two kinds of leaves, burnt sienna color with a hint of green rises and amber leaves fall.
Oh, I like that. Burnt leaves color, a sienna color with slight hint of green. And I'm glad you're taking a look at these leaves, a close look at these leaves, because unlike some of the reds where you've got a lot of gold, you don't have much gold with this. You do have reddish or brownish, clearly, and you have a little bit of greenish. So what does that indicate? That indicates how long they actually pile the tea, how long they let it oxidize. So again, remembering that when you're oxidizing a red, what you're trying to do, and this is part of the magic that they brought from Yunnan County down to Yunnan, because I got through the process where they actually piled it and then they bake it. But post-bake in Yunnan County, they also have some other processes they do to refine the leaves. Well, they taught them in Yunnan how to do, or in feng cheng, I should say, how to do some of these processes. So you have these leaves a little bit more processed than a normal, and there is no such thing as a normal, than a non-feng cheng red. So this is called a gongfu, and the gongfu here means a mastery or a master level of red tea. Yes.
The wet leaves have such a sweet aroma. The liquor is not very sweet at all by contrast. It's pleasantly drying on the tongue, full flavor that lingers and blooms. And is that a hint of bamboo we detect?
Oh, great commentary. So the smell doesn't match the taste, which is a great observation, because you smell these leaves, you get a sweetness to them, almost almost a little bit like a honey-likeness in the leaves. But that's not what you're getting in the tea liquor. You get a drying, you get hints of vegetal. And the vegetal identified here was a hint of bamboo. And that is an okay description. That's a good description, actually, of what you're getting in here.
The wet leaves smell like a sweet berry wine.
Great observation. Wet leaves smell like a sweet berry wine. So I use the word honey, but I like your description better. Sweet berry wine. And why do I like your description better? Because honey never has an implication of a slight hint of fruity tartness. That sweet berry wine actually catches that hint of tartness.
Smell of the dry, warm, and wet leaves did not prepare me for the tea liquor. The tea liquor has a hint of honey or caramel, and the flavor has a hint of hot apple cider.
Oh, I love this. All right, flavor. I particularly like the comparison to hot apple cider. Why? Because most of us who've had traditional hot apple cider, there's cloves in it. So there again is some sort of other flavor, either a spiciness, slight hint of spiciness, or a slight hint of tartness. This commentator also made a great observation of what's in this tea liquor. Not what is exactly in it, but the flavor profile of what's in it, which is hints of caramel. I definitely get that hint of caramel, and good observation of that.
Would this tea or some other teas you can recommend be suitable for a cold tea, a cold brew? It's hot in Texas.
Oh, okay. Would this tea be suitable for a cold brew? Absolutely would be. So this one, we've actually, in years past, when we were doing cold brew, we used to use this one quite often. And one of the reasons that this is good for that is because there's so much going on with the flavor that actually comes through in a cold brew. And while it's not as distinct as in the hot, it's still enough that it catches people's attention. Great question.
So if you brew it warm and then pour it over ice, you'll get some of
Oh,
that
I
also
see. I see. Brew it hot and then pour it over ice. You could do that, but that's tricky. So why is that tricky? Because if you did it the way your words described, you would have, in quotes, a slightly watered down flavor. So how do you get around that? How can you make this so you get that full punch and say that you want to be more efficient and you want to do it on the spot? You don't want to have to wait 8, 12, 16 hours for a true cold brew. How would you do it? Well, you'd use the same amount of tea leaves, but instead of 16 ounces of water, you'd use something like 6 ounces of water. And instead of 3 minutes, you'd use 2 minutes. So what's the magic of doing that? That just sounds like you made up numbers off the top of your head. I assure you, I did not make up numbers. We do this here just that way when we don't have a cold brew. And what's the advantage? It concentrates the flavor. And when you pour that over ice at the end of the pour, and you do it a few times to get to the 16-ounce cup, at the end of the pour, you still have that strong concentration, and you have cold tea, iced tea.
It feels smooth on the tongue. This is fun tea.
Fun tea. I love this comment. And yes, it is fun tea. Smooth on the tongue. This is very smooth. And contrast it with last week's classic. Classic was smooth and round as well, but not, in quotes, fun tea. So what is the difference? Why this week have we said fun versus the last 2 weeks we didn't use the word fun? One of the reasons has to do with that tartness slash spiciness that's coming through. And so you're not getting just a traditional tea flavor. You're getting a traditional tea flavor that's augmented with these other interesting elements. Fun.
Any food pairing suggestions?
Food pairing suggestions. Well, what I would think about is obviously an afternoon tea. And what I would actually use this for is non-salted cashews. Why? Because the cashews have a rich flavor themselves. If you add salt, it will change the nature of how you appreciate this tea. But without the salt, the influence works upside down. In other words, the tea combines very nicely with that cashew flavor. It's like, oh my God. Now, I warn you, so don't say you weren't warned, because if you do that, don't buy just a little tiny can of cashews. If you're serving company with this tea, you better buy the Costco size, super size bag of cashews.
On the flavor front, slightly sweet, light lemon. Oh, for food pairing, somebody suggests slightly sweet, light lemon butter cookies.
Slightly, for food pairing, slightly sweet butter lemon cookies. I actually think I like that. Yes, I do like that. This also would go well with, none of you have had Rob's partner's almond cookies, except we have. And they're light and they're full of butter. That would also be a great pairing with this.
This would be a fun tea to serve to children. Very approachable, easy to appreciate.
Great comment. A fun tea to serve to children. Yes, children would end up lapping this stuff up. It is a great tea for kids.
There's a noticeable cooling sensation as I drink more of it.
Good. I was waiting for this. This tea has a very obvious cooling sensation. And by the way, this for me is a little strange because it's not just as a pure aftertaste component, it's throughout your mouth that there's a cooling sensation. And I know all of you would like me to create an answer for why that is. And usually I love creating answers, but not in this case. The real answer is, I don't know, but you picked it up.
All the aromas for another participant comments, all the aromas for me in dry leaves, wet leaves, liquor have been so elusive, but then there's this juicy sort of full mouth pleasure, and it's in the swallow that I find the flavor and umami and mysterious melange that just satisfies for me.
Great comment. So this commentator talks about a couple important things. The first impression from this commentator is not so much the taste at all. It's more the juiciness, the drinkability of this tea. And the flavor comes on the swallow, and the interestingness of the melange of flavors comes through that swallow. And so again, this tea behaves a little bit differently than the other two reds in that sense, because you get this coolness throughout your mouth. Nobody mentioned that the last 2 weeks because it wasn't there. You get that flavor which some perceive fairly early, but some perceive a little later in the swallow. And that's unusual for a red. And so one of you in a minute is going to ask me the following question. what inspiration did you have for naming this tea? And it really has to do with the fact when you compare it to other reds, it is a treasure. It is different. It's very unique. And by putting it as national treasure, it's unique among the reds everywhere within China. And you've picked up on many of the reasons why.
Someone checked his tea notes and is commenting, this reminds him of another Sophie's tea called Spring Exhalations.
Ah, that's a great comparison. So somebody compared this, looking at their notes, to Spring Exhalations, a fabulous comparison. For me, the difference between the two is Spring Exhalations leads with hints of spice and the other flavors follow. This leads more with a tartness and flavors, and then that spiciness comes to the fore.
To the commenter's credit, he followed up with the fact that that other tea, Spring Exhalations, had a hint of cinnamon that this one does not.
And great cut, great catch.
Someone notes this tea seems thinner bodied than opulent and classic to other Sophie's teas.
Oh, I like this comment too, and it's for a different reason. So this commentator says, okay, I took good notes with opulent, I took great notes with classic, and when I compare all three, this one seems thinner. Noticing that, of course, the commentator didn't say that this is thin, but thinner than opulent and classic. And both opulent and classic have a hugeness of mouthfeel, a density of mouthfeel that this does not have. So great catch on that.
Connected to a previous cooling comment, somebody else notes that there's not the same core warming that she experienced with opulent and classic. Instead, it's sort of mouth and throat soothing.
Oh, that's very interesting. So this is an energetics comment. So this commentator notes that, again, compared to the other recent teas we've had, this one doesn't have that core warming quality that opulent and classic had. It's not that it's lacking in warming. The warming for this commentator is in the throat. And also the commentator notes that probably influenced by that mouth cooling feeling. And
more mouth throat soothing, not so much warming even for her, but more just soothing to the mouth and soothing to the throat.
All right, soothing to the mouth and soothing to the throat. And I concur that for me at least, this is less obviously warming than either opulent or classic. And again, for me, it's that cooling that's lingering in my mouth, which is the energetic, which is so surprising about this. All right, so my goodness, we've covered the whole hour. Great commentary. This is a fun tea. And this set of reds, now you have an understanding that you didn't have prior to this comparative set of reds. You got classic, which is on one end of the Dianhuns or the Yunnan reds, and then you have national treasure, which is very different. And the energetics are different. The mouth cooling feature is different. Remember, classics we talked about being more of a pure, traditional red tea taste. This one is not a traditional red tea taste. You guys, all of you, picked up right away that the flavor of this is just different. And again, one of my favorite comments was the mixed berry wine, because it captures the tartness, the sweetness, really unusual. So you saw those differences. And by the way, how far apart are these farms? Are they in, one is in Western Yunnan and the other is in Eastern Yunnan? The answer is no. These farms are separated by 12 miles. So they're close to each other, but their varietals are different and the processing modality is a little bit more complex with National Treasure versus Classic. On top of that, we took a red, which is outside of Yunnan, and we took a red that was Anhui. So you get a sense of how historically these are connected, especially when you drink this one, because we talked about a little bit more complicated processing. This has this brings a more complicated flavor to the palate. Really interesting. So that's what we accomplished during the regs. Now I wonder where we're going next. Oh, we're thinking about a catechin boost. That means green teas. So starting next week, we will do a series of 3 green teas. And I believe next week we have chara, which if you haven't had that, you're in for an absolute thrilling surprise. All right, so you have instructions for this week. Let's talk about those instructions for a minute. You're to stay healthy this week. You are to take extra precautions this week because, in quotes, the wave is rolling over us. Let's get that wave out to sea without having any of you drift with it. That's your assignment this week. As usual, your commentary was just great. We love having your comments. They always stimulate our thoughts. And again, thank you for all the articles and thank you for your thoughtful comments about how we're doing things. Really, really appreciate it. They always make me think about how can I do better? How can I have a better presentation for you? All right, y'all have a great week now. You take care now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye, and thank you.
Everybody.
Take care.